Welcome to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, your guide to future tech trends and innovation in a language you understand. Now, over to your host, Neil Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, where today I want to explore the world of blockchain innovators in trade finance. So when I learned that TradeIX and R3 launched Project Marco Polo as a joint undertaking, together with over a dozen of the world's foremost financial institutions that are active in trade finance, including BNP Paribas, Commerzbank, ING and Natwest, I felt compelled to find out more. And usually I would just invite TradeIX or R3 onto the podcast and talk about how they're looking to transform trade finance through technology. But today, I want to try something a little bit different. I thought to myself, what if I could get people from all the companies based all over the world and see if we can show how they're actually collaborating with each other to reshape trade finance, all by leveraging technology and working together. Because very often we talk about the solution, we talk about the vision, but we don't hear any real world use cases. We don't see how companies are actually working together and adopting this technology. So I invited Nicole Lefevre from R3, whose Corda platform delivers on the promise of blockchain for every business in every industry, Andrew Spears, Director of Product Innovation over at Natwest within the RBS Group, Alain Vishuren from BNP Paribas, and David Sutter from TradeIX. And I've essentially invited them all onto the show to see if they would be willing to partake in such a conversation. And thankfully, they all said yes. So we found a moment where the planets aligned, where time zones and calendars all made it possible to make it onto the same call. It's a complex topic, and I've somehow managed to round up everyone located for multiple companies scattered all over the world and get them onto this one phone call. And they're waiting to speak with us right now. This is a first for me, so fingers crossed this will work. Buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears on a whistle-stop tour all around the world as we learn more about the Marco Polo network and how it's driving innovation in trade finance. So you're all here today to talk about the Marco Polo network. So could you just tell us, everyone listening, exactly what it is and why it was created?
This is Nicole from R3. I'm a project lead here. So the Marco Polo Network is a industry-led initiative of banks, corporates, and third-party providers who in tandem are developing a business network that facilitates working capital and trade finance solutions which have been built by TradeIX. The applications make use of open APIs to existing bank portals, ERP provider technology, and also to Corda's distributed ledger technology, with the goal of enabling real-time and seamless connectivity between trade participants. So I can provide some context just in terms of how Marco Polo actually started. So the project itself kicked off in mid-2017 as a proof of concept, which was initially led by R3 with a group of financial institutions. At this point, TradeIX came on board as the technology partner to develop the initial Corda application. And following the successful proof of concept, which concluded in 2017, the initiative moved forward to a pilot phase in 2018. So there are now 12 founding member banks of Marco Polo. They're geographically dispersed between Europe and Asia. And I guess it's fair to say we've had quite a journey up until now. So 2018 was a very interesting and exciting year. We spent a lot of time defining what a distributed network looks like, as well as defining the products which we want to go to market with. And it's been a really great experience, given all the parties we've had in one room together who have collaboratively been working together to create this network.
Fantastic. Thanks, Nicole. And another question I feel I've got to ask is, banks have been providing trade finance and working capital solutions for centuries now. So I think we should highlight the actual problems. I mean, what actually needs fixing today?
Yeah, so I think that's a good question for me to cover. It's Andrew Spears here, Director of Product and Innovation within Natwest. I think for me, Neil, the honest answer is nothing has really changed over those centuries. The Templar Knights created the first paper-based trade instruments in the 13th century, and since then, we've really only managed to create better paper solutions or digitalized representations of paper. With things like OCR and scanning, we're just sending PDFs or emails around the world. With the current suite of software solutions, we rely on centralized entities that add unnecessary intermediation and delays, as you need a system designed specifically for a sole function. I think right now, we break a trade transaction down into multiple constituent parts and then send these via those different intermediated channels I spoke about earlier. This has built a system that relies on disparate networks, a network for paper, a network for goods, a network for financial flows, a network for messaging. It's horrifically inefficient and results in duplication of data, time delays, potential for fraud and discrepancies to creep in, amongst a long list of other factors. Then our customers and our internal user experience is shocking as a result. We've made trade complicated and built industries around it to support its complicated, disparate structure. I think now technology has caught up with the problems. We can create a way for parties to connect and exchange data, and that data is exchanged peer-to-peer with identity. Distributed ledger technology, or DLT, gives us that. We're now working in a digitally connected ecosystem where value storage and exchange, rich data and identity are all linked. If you look at some data that's come out of Bain & Co., some of their research suggests that mass adoption of DLT could enable $1 trillion of new trade volumes by 2026. And this is really a huge opportunity and could drive the next wave of global growth and economic development for Industry 3.0 and into Industry 4.0. DLT will also help break down those silos, bring the participants together, creating the efficiencies, or more likely, I should say, eliminating the different disparate networks. And DLT allows banks to create future products then for clients that don't even exist yet. So thereby improving the user experience, reducing the times, reducing cost, releasing important capital for growth. Then, in the future, looking forwards a little bit, if we can build AI and machine learning sitting over the top of some of this digitally connected ecosystems, we can really start building some cool solutions for clients. Just think bespoke offerings designed for an individual client's needs that learns and interacts live to a client's business conditions and even forward predicts their needs. That's really my view.
Excellent. Thanks, Andrew. And something else I think we must raise is that there are a number of blockchain initiatives in the trade finance space right now. So can you share with us your experience so far with these type of initiatives?
Yes, indeed, Neil. Alan Verschuren here talking. I'm heading our innovation for trade finance in BNP Paribas. And you're right, there are many, many initiatives. We as BNP Paribas are also involved in several, like many other banks. They often are actually trying to address the same issues, but not in the same way, quite always not in the same way. So, and that already starts saying something about our experience. How do you make a choice? How do you determine if you believe that initiative will be successful or not? How do you select those where you want to participate actively and others which you just want to follow a bit more from a distance, but still want to stay informed? There are quite a lot of factors that come into play in the selection of your initiatives. It could be either an idea that you helped initiate. It could be the choice of partners, the importance of the use case for your particular bank, the technology that is being used. So there are many, many aspects that can come into play. Now, the experience I find throughout these different initiatives tells us that every initiative follows roughly the same path. So you determine, usually through workshops with client feedback, pain points that you want to resolve. And many pain points were mentioned just earlier by Andrew. From there, you try to determine what are the scope and functionalities you want to develop. You prepare a proof of concept, and after that proof of concept is successful, and frankly, in my experience, most proof of concepts are successful, then you start working towards a minimal viable product that can be launched after you've done several successful pilots, which test the MVP. And then finally, you want to go to a full production, integrating with legacy systems, scale and onboard clients and other banks and non-banks. So it's a whole path. And of course, it's getting each time more and more complex. Now, an essential point in all that is to keep clients constantly involved in order to check that what you are preparing and what you are doing effectively meets their demands and their expectations. I think like many banks, we as BNP Paribas, we've done workshops and several proof of concepts to brainstorm, test, learn. Clients were always associated to this, but that's not enough. Specifically with DLT, a common point with all these initiatives, and specifically with DLT, because of the pure definition of DLT, you need to work with others and you need to align with your peers. And while you ultimately want to onboard as many actors as possible, practically it's not feasible. You cannot work on such projects with a very, very large group. So you start with a small group. But of course, what you cannot do is you cannot force others to stand on the line and wait until you're done. So often they may very well start a similar initiative. Now then the question is, how will those converge? It's going to be through merger, it's going to be through interoperability. The governance of these projects may be very different and not necessarily compatible. Another point in our experience is that difficulty is how do you communicate and when do you communicate about projects? Usually they are covered by NDAs. Agreeing on coming out in the press is not necessarily easy. Some want to do it quickly, other ones prefer to wait until the end game is clear. So there also you can have, you need to align and to find a consensus. And one of the things that you learn throughout this journey is that these projects, in these projects, is that the concepts and proof of concept sometimes look relatively simple, but while you go deeper and closer to MVP in production, they become more and more complex. I already mentioned conversions. Then you have integration with legacy systems that is very cumbersome, complex, expensive. And you cannot just abandon your BAU, so you have to continue with your existing maintenance of your existing systems. And you can also not underestimate the number of functionalities that banks have been developing on legacy systems over years based on experience and client feedback. So it takes time for a new MVP to evolve and to get to the same level. So overall, very interesting. It's been incredibly interesting to work with peers on such initiatives, but it's very challenging at the same time. We all have our own instructions and procedures from our respective banks to follow, not necessarily always adapted to an agile way of working necessary for new initiatives. And we have to find a common ground since we are in consortium. So, and with that come the additional complexity of being confronted with a new technology and a regulatory and legal framework that is not yet totally adapted to these technologies. So in a nutshell, it's been a great experience so far, but it's far from being over yet. We're keep discovering new faces, new challenges while we progress. But we're all very, very eager to see the first production and results.
Fantastic. Thanks, Alan. And just for everyone listening at home, that they're reading about so many different solutions out there. What is it that is so unique about the Marco Polo network, in your opinion?
Yeah, so this is Dave Sutter, the Chief Strategy Officer for TradeIX. I'll go ahead and take that one. I think, obviously, and I may be biased, there's a lot that's unique and different and great about the Marco Polo network. But I think when we zoom in, there's really 5 primary differentiators between the Marco Polo network and other similar initiatives in the market. The first is that we're building a truly open network, and not just by saying it's open, but by actually putting our money where our mouths are and designing a governance and a network that will amalgamate and allow interactions between many different technology providers and participants. So a lot of the initiatives you see in the market are very closed ecosystems where you have only one vendor and you have to use their technology and you have to use their cloud and you have to use their infrastructure and you have to use their business services, right? And this is the exact opposite of that. So this is Marco Polo is much more like Android in that it's an open ecosystem where yes, TradeIX is the first technology provider and the business network operator, but heading into the future, we really see a lot of opportunity and demand for technology providers from all over the world who want to come into Marco Polo Network and build solutions and deploy them and commercialize them. And you start to get the same dynamics that you would with an Android or an iOS, the same sort of network effects and value-added services that open ecosystem of providers brings. And, to highlight that, we even have some banks right now who are building their own apps to run on the network. So it truly is open. It will only become more open as we move into the future. And I think that's very important for participants because they want to know that they don't have vendor lock-in, that they're not solely committed and solely tied to only one solution, and that you can actually see some competitive dynamics arise within the business network that ultimately benefit the end user, as we've seen work so well on other ecosystems like smartphones or cloud-based platforms like Salesforce.com. The next would be really the technology foundation of the Marco Polo network. First, it's a truly distributed network. So a lot of the other initiatives we see do use distributed ledger technology, but they sort of forget the first word in DLT, which is distributed. And they end up with these highly centralized applications that really do end up relying on trust in one single party to control data, to validate transactions, to manage keys, for example. And with the Marco Polo network, this is a truly distributed network where each participant controls its own data, runs its own node, and has ultimate custody over the assets that it owns and may wish to finance, for example. The second is by building on Corda, we're inherently interoperable with any other Corda business network now or in the future. With other protocols we see out in the market that are popular in the enterprise, a private Fabric network is not interoperable with another private Fabric network, or a private Ethereum network is not interoperable with another private Ethereum network. To get those two to talk, you basically have to do the same thing you would with legacy software, which is wire them together with middleware or APIs. With the use of Corda, we are from day one inherently interoperable with other business networks like Project Voltron, even ones that are outside of trade like LenderCom or any of the great payments projects or KYC projects. Participants in the Marco Polo network can take advantage of those solutions and other business networks from day one without any additional integration work. And lastly, on the technology front, is we are focused on standards and interoperability with other non-Corda networks. So actually, Marco Polo was the founding or the spark of an initiative called the Universal Trade Network, which is now an industry-wide initiative involving industry bodies, many different banks, many different consortiums, and other standards bodies who are creating standards with an eye on true interoperability outside of Corda and even outside of distributed ledger-based networks. And I think that focus on the future and the focus on doing things for the good, doing technology things for the good of the overall industry is also something that's unique about Marco Polo. The next thing is we do have a truly global focus. And some may say, look, you have to start small. You have to start in one jurisdiction. It's too hard to conquer the world all at once. To them, I say we're focused on cross-border trade. So really from day one, we have to build with the assumption that our bank members and their corporate clients are going to want to do trade across borders, and that we should have as little restrictions on our ability to support that cross-border trade as possible. So we have banks in North America and Western Europe and the Asia Pacific region. We just have our first Latin American bank. And as such, we have to focus on a truly global cross-border network. And a lot of the other initiatives are really sort of very focused on, specific regions or specific geographies. And I think that limits their viability commercially. The last two things would be the next thing would be, we truly do have an ambitious scope. And again, this is something that some may say, well, look, we sort of have to crawl, walk, run. And they're really focused on the deployment of a single application, not necessarily a general purpose network and platform that can support all manner of different trade and working capital solutions, which is the case for Marco Polo. And the reason we've made that decision is because we're not really in the business of recreating products that already exist. We want to generally create something that's new and that's never been done before. And that really does push the limits and gets us out right on the barrier of the bleeding edge. And that makes our scope very ambitious. And that Marco Polo is not just a single destination application for a single product, but rather it's a platform that allows you to run and develop many different apps and solutions. And the end state of that is that a corporate, a bank, another industry participant can come to Marco Polo Network and really find a solution that works for them based on their existing business problem. If they need working capital financing, offering payables and receivables finance. If they're looking for risk mitigation, either as an importer and exporter, we have a payment commitment product, and so on and so forth. So it really is designed to be a very ambitious scope, and we're proud of that. The last thing that differentiates the Marco Polo network from other initiatives we've seen is that the banks involved have made a true commitment to focus on the corporate customer. And a lot of times that commitment can create some uncomfortable situations that banks will sit there and say, potentially, maybe we are cannibalizing ourselves in some regard by creating a new offering. But to a bank, every single participant in Marco Polo has said, no, we're going to do what's best for the corporate, because what's best for the corporate is what's best for us. And so because of that focus and that commitment by our bank members, we've really been able to dive headlong into things like providing native integrations to corporate systems of record, or in other words, ERPs. So we have native one-click enablement with Microsoft Dynamics and NetSuite corporate ERPs, and are continuing to add more support for more ERPs as we move forward. And what for the corporate customer, that allows them to access a multi-bank network with many different trade and working capital solutions from a single interface with a single integration, right? So we've sort of eliminated that whole portal fatigue and all the integration and operational costs that corporates have when it comes time to take advantage of trade and working capital solutions. Now they have one single integration, one single interface to an entire ecosystem. And so those things, an open network, our technology decisions, our global focus, the ambitious scope, and finally the focus on the corporate customer are the primary things that I really think differentiate Marco Polo Network from anything else out in the market.
Thanks, Dave. And this conversation, I think, proves just how open and collaborative you guys are. But if we just come back to the Marco Polo network for the moment, how are these different parties in the trade ecosystem working together and collaborating? Is there any examples you can talk about there?
First and foremost, I think all parties, all the people who are working on Marco Polo, they are starting with the same mindset. They know this is a collaborative effort, so they have the right mindset is there from the beginning. They all understand the Marco Polo concept, and working with peers and other actors in the trades and the supply chain space, sharing professional experience to shape a product that has to respond to very high expectations is key for a project like Marco Polo. So I think we all understand that. And the way this is organized, it's quite similar to many other projects. It's through workshops where we physically meet and go into the details, because the devil is in the detail, as always, to work streams that regularly sit together, that are focusing either on the products, on the technology, on the marketing, on the sales side, and then usually governed by steercos. So this is going on for quite a while and works really well. And regularly we onboard also new players that are coming into this picture. But of course, we're also competitors. So and we have our own strategy. So they may align or they may a bit less align. So we have to find the right balance between competition and collaboration. That's really essential. My experience throughout in the last several years with things like DLT is that the boundary has shifted between new technologies, or it has shifted between collaborative and competitive space. The Marco Polo platform, as Dave was alluding to first, is relatively unique in its approach. The fact that it has a modular approach, for example, allowing for multiple apps, is at the same time its beauty, but it's also a challenge. You need to prioritize the developments. You cannot do everything at the same time. But then all participants do not necessarily have all the same priorities. And I think we're all impatient to see our production start first. So that's a difficulty, it's a challenge. On the other hand, the beauty is when you start building some of these things, there are a lot of common points to different applications. So developments will likely accelerate once you have a first production that has started and that's ready. So besides technical and functionalities aspects, a very important thing in a project like this is to fix the governance of such a network. It's something we are collectively all working out now. You cannot do that too early, but you're also not too late in the stage because there are even more members that are joining. Potential of number of applications and members to the network is really important. So you need to onboard them and organize them in an orderly fashion. So governance is really important. It's an important, it's a challenging aspect of all initiatives. Marco Polo definitely as well because of its complexity and its wide ambition. You need to determine priorities, voting rights, decisions on onboarding new members, and when what about new applications, partnerships, and all types of decisions like that have to be taken. The governance should also be allowed to evolve. As we are in a dynamic and an agile environment, so it needs to be adapted on a regular basis.
Thanks, Alan. So as we look to the future as well, I mean, what are the key milestones in 2019 and what are you looking forward to in the coming years?
So I think in 2019 for Natwest, clearly we're looking to go live and build out some of these existing DLT projects. We've spoken a lot today about Marco Polo, developed by TradeIX, really focused initially on some of those open account products. But to Dave's points, it's got a much broader vision in terms of what it wants to be. There's Voltron, which we're looking to go live with at the end of this year. Al and BNP are also involved in that one, and that's another bank consortium looking at documentary trade for letters of credit. There's LenderCom, which is a Finastra developed solution, looking at loan syndications. That's just to name a few of the current ones that are out there. They're all running on R3's core to enterprise, which I think our house view as a bank is probably the most fit for purpose peer-to-peer distributed ledger technology out there right now. And we'll continue to not just work on these particular consortiums, but we'll look to do more with other groups over time on Corda as much as we can. We are also now building our next round of DLT projects, which I can't go into too much detail and talk about yet due to commercial confidentiality, but Natwest really believe that one or two of these could have the potential to be a paradigm shift in global financial markets. I'm a big believer that distributed ledger technology, I think to all of the points building on what Dave and Al have said, is the real value comes in the sum of the parts. Once you start getting connected disparate networks together and you're achieving efficiencies in those systems, you're going to only get more and more benefits over time. This is the real frontier of financial services right now, and I'm super excited to be part of a forward-thinking group in Natwest and amongst my peers here today who are looking at this and talking about this. Our group in particular is continuing to build up our talent pool, which is really important when you're working with frontier type products. Having specialist subject matter experts who are focused on DLT. We now have built a centralized DLT center of excellence within our group technology function. So they can be a central point for conversations like how do you host a node, what internal approval processes do you have to go through to connect into a business network on Corda or on another protocol for distributed ledger technology or blockchain. We've now got a connected and centralized DLT strategy supported at the highest level within our organization who are signing off the innovation budgets for these particular initiatives. So it's got oversight, it's got centralization, it's got good governance and rigor built around it with a real focus on building people out. And 2019, building the people out's a key milestone within that. Not only are we building it out, but we're sharing ideas, getting back to what I was talking about in terms of the sum of the parts. The more I talk about it, the more I preach about it, the more internally I can connect and educate other staff within our group and communicate regularly to ensure that we get value from DLT investment is crucial as a milestone. So I keep coming back to it's the sum of the parts. Natwest really understands that while each DLT project must stack up individually to make commercial and economic sense, the real value is in that connected ecosystem. The more we do, the better it gets, the better the value is for all our customers and our stakeholders. Then we have the highest internal oversight. As I said earlier, the CEO knows what we're doing and is holding the purse strings on a lot of these spend activities. In the coming years, in terms of where I'd like to see it moving, I'd like to see the momentum which is already happening. I'd like to see that continue. If I was to put my future vision goggles on and look into 2020 and beyond, I'd like to see us completely re-platforming our existing SaaS models into platform as a service models, internally built systems converted to DLT native platform as a service models, all running in a cloud environment with dynamic charging and usage, then effectively interfacing this with customizable client solutions that are linking direct to our client systems with, as I said earlier on today, with AI and machine learning, making continual tweaks to our bespoke service so that NatWest is constantly ensuring it's always offering our clients the best possible solution, their best limits, best terms, best price, etc., to help them really just get on with running their business. Into the future, if we can get some of this stuff right, I'd really love to hear our clients simply say that we understand them better than anybody else, and they can just, quite frankly, get on with doing their business without worrying about their banks. That's sort of my altruistic vision.
Summarizing very quickly, if I can say from my side, key milestones for me. Again, I would hate to talk only about DLT. I know we talk here about blockchain, but for me, innovation, it's not. It's regardless of the type of technology you use. And it's usually many of the projects are a combination of different technologies. It's DLT, it's AI, it's IoT, it's cloud, APIs. There's the whole host of many of these technologies. And the beauty is that a lot of these technologies are leveraging on each other and are making things possible. So I guess for us, for me at least, in my space, specifically in trade finance, is that to get things in production ready in 2019. 2019, a lot of people are impatient, definitely when you talk about blockchain, probably because of the hype. There's been over expectation, while I think most of us always warned everybody this is going to take time. Don't expect things to come out in the next year or two, but still, I think there are a lot of expectations. People getting a bit nervous, okay, nothing is live yet. Well, I think 2019 things will start going really to production. We've had live small production MVPs, we had live pilots, but I think more bigger productions are going to come in 2019. So that's for us, I think, a key milestone. Onboarding of this and other platforms, Andrew mentioned a couple in which we are as well, onboarding more players, getting scale, getting a broader attraction is also absolutely key to get them to the stage where we want it to be. And then a point I want to stress as well is interoperability project. We are working also on initiatives, industry-wide initiatives, to facilitate interoperability between all these platforms. The last thing we want to do is create more digital islands that cannot communicate with each other. So while we work on so many different platforms and initiatives, we are also trying to address, with the help of TradeIX and R3 and many other banks and non-banks in the world, we're trying to address that issue and work on initiatives that hopefully can help working on common standards and facilitate interoperability between the many initiatives that are being worked on.
So I think many people listening would have heard all about the companies that you're all from today and know all about that long list of emerging technologies. But what I really love about today's conversation is hearing how you're all collaborating together. And that combined with the tech capabilities, that's what really excites me. So a big thank you for taking the time to join me today and help everyone listening visualise the future of trade finance that you're building together. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil.
Wow, what a great chat. And I think somehow we pulled it off, having all those people on one call without it sounding like a chat line from the 80s. Remember those days where you'd ring an 0898 number and you'd just be chatting away to various people from all over the world? That's one for the older kids out there in the days before the internet, but I digress. I'm so glad that Nicole, Andrew, Elaine and David all accepted the invite, because I love how Marco Polo is providing this cutting-edge open account trade solutions, along with a robust suite of trade-specific APIs, sophisticated rules engine and an open standard core infrastructure. And also, of course, the secure single source of truth for critical trade data, including identities, purchase orders, invoices, shipping and logistic information, trade assets, finance activity and credit risk. If this really can result in the reduction of fraud and the elimination of costly errors, disputes and delays that result in faster implementation processes and lower costs, it's got to be a great thing, hasn't it? And ultimately, the increase of trade finance volume with existing and new facilities will enable new revenue opportunities by connecting new originators, reducing costs of delivery finance solutions, and creating additional truth in data sources for funding. But if you work in the world of trade finance, I'd love to hear what you made of today's conversation, because we covered a lot of ground from a lot of different angles and a lot of different points of view. Did you find any value in listening to the whole conversation there? And did it leave you with any additional questions or additional thoughts? Please, you can email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. You can get me on Twitter, Instagram and LinkedIn just by searching for Neil C. Hughes. And I'd genuinely love to hear your thoughts. So please, send me your takeaways and I'll meet you here again tomorrow for another great episode. But thanks for listening. Thanks for helping make today's episode work. And a big thank you to all the guests as well for making time in their incredibly busy calendars to make today work too. And last but by no means least, a big thank you to each and every one of you listening. But all that's left for me to say is until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Until next time, remember, technology is best when it brings people together.